Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how I made Jareth's ballroom costume from the movie Labyrinth. Every year in Los Angeles there is a masquerade ball called the Labyrinth of Jareth, and it is held at the Millennium Biltmore Hotel over 2 days, generally the middle of September, first weekend of September. Sometimes it changes a little bit, but this was the year that I decided I'm going to make my Sarah ball gown costume, and I didn't want to just do that. I wanted to have a Jareth with me. So thankfully my friend Owen is amazing, and I said, would you please go as this character in this costume if I make it for you? You don't have to pay a dime, you just need to wear it. And thankfully he agreed. So that kind of jump started this project, and around February was when I got started. Because I was making both my ball gown and all of its accessories and the wig and whatnot, I didn't have a lot of spare cash to make the Jareth costume. I did want to do it justice, but I wanted and needed to do it on a budget. So I set the budget for $150, and as you can see from the title, I was able to do it for less than that. I would be remiss if I didn't admit that I was able to stay under budget because I cut corners as much as I could in terms of fabric costs. You'll see the breakdown in a moment of what I actually spent. Jareth's in the movie is not made with upholstery velvet, but upholstery of velvet is what fit in my budget. So you'll see some areas where I kind of cut corners just due to cost, but honestly, I'm really thrilled with the final outcome. And if you're on a budget, you know, you make it work. And that's basically what I did here. I should also mention that my friend Owen does not live where I live, so there was no way for me to get him fitted for this costume, and so I did a lot of the fitting on myself. We have similar measurements. He's a little bit taller, a little bit lankier and slimmer than me, but for the most part it worked. So when you see me trying on the coat in the video, it's because I was trying to make sure it, you know, it was a little tighter on me so it would fit well on him. And then he didn't actually wear the entire costume until the actual day of the masquerade ball, and it actually fit him perfectly, spoiler alert. So I was very pleased with everything. A dress form helped so much in that respect, and I cannot recommend them enough. Last thing I should mention is that I really procrastinated in making both his costume and my costume, and I had San Diego Comic-Con and a bunch of other things happen that really condensed my timeline for this. So I believe I made his entire costume in under a week. I think it might have been 5 days, somewhere around there. So considering I was on a budget, I couldn't fit the costume to the person it was for until the day of, and I didn't have a lot of time. I am very proud of how this came together. And I should also say really quickly, this was all filmed on my iPhone. Sorry about the interesting audio. Sometimes you'll hear the fan or the air conditioner going off in the background. I do apologize for that. I'm looking to upgrade my camera, but until I have some more funds, that isn't happening. So without further ado, here is my making of Jareth's costume from the movie Labyrinth. Here are the fabrics I'll be using for Jareth. This was $5, if I can grab it. This was $5 a yard velvet, upholstery velvet at Joann's. Good enough because it's going to be covered by this, for the most part, that I got at a fabric remnant store, donation store. I think I paid maybe, I don't know, $8 for this whole thing, of which I won't need. This will be the lining for inside the velvet, and then the tailcoat lining will be this lame, which is perfect. It looks just like what Jareth's has. And then I found this for his cummerbund. However, it does need to be dyed. I'm hoping this will take the dye well. If not, we'll see. But these are what I'll be using. Let's go. In terms of a pattern, I picked this up. Unfortunately, it was in the bigger size. The person I'm making this for is a bit smaller, but I can fit it. It's not a big deal. And huge shout out to Keely Ann on YouTube. She made Jareth's outfit, and her YouTube video was incredibly helpful, and she's actually the one who recommended this pattern, so I'm following her lead because hers came out great, and bought the same pattern for mine. So thank you, Keely. That's really appreciated. Your tutorial was so helpful. I will link her video in the description box in case you guys wanted to check that out. So this is the mock-up. This is the side that I've altered. I've gone ahead and added a bit more to the lapel so it extends out. When worn, the collar is not nearly high enough, so I do need to add about 5 inches to get it that nice swoop. And then I've also cut that more at a curve. But yeah, I think we're in a good place so far. Once my mock-up was finalized, I went ahead and assembled both the lining layer and the fashion layer, and then gave it a quick try on to make sure everything was sitting correctly. After that, I took out the black lace and started figuring out how I wanted to piece it onto the actual fashion fabric layer of the jacket itself. It's clearly not a perfect match to what we see on screen, but I did my best. This is where I'm at so far. I'm basically just taking pieces of lace, cutting them to fit, and then pinning them. And then I'm going to baste them, or baste it, or sew it to there. And then I have these that will then be glued to the jacket. Here is the outer fashion layer with the lace basted in place. I didn't do it as a full just because it doesn't actually go down to the bottom of the coat. So just kind of pieced it and cut it accordingly. Here's the, I know it looks off center, but it doesn't fit the dress form. Here's the coat. That's bothering me. There we go. And then obviously I gotta glue all the beads on, but it's coming along. Now I need to do the same thing with the lace to the facing, and then I can work on the collar. So the lining is pretty much done now. I am contemplating adding maybe like a cotton canvas just to this area to give it a bit more, you know, structure, a bit more body, so that when I add all the beads, it doesn't completely collapse. But I do have some black cotton canvas, and like I said, it would just be like for that area there. But that's done other than that. So I think now it's time to move on to the collar. Once the lace was placed how I wanted it, I went ahead and took out all of these beads, my embroidery hoop, a lot of thread, and a hand needle, and got started sewing all of these beads individually to the jacket. Yes, Jareth has seed beads as well, and his are much smaller, but I was on a time crunch and a budget, so I did my best. Not really following like a set pattern, just kind of, you know, filling in the gaps with the beads, but it's giving it some really cool definition, which I love. But now I gotta do more of this and then the front. I bought 2 of these. I used one full, let me see what it says, 85 grams, 2.9 ounces of 6-ounce glass seed beads to add some dimension. His obviously has much smaller beads, but I am on a time crunch, and doing all this hand sewing was not really anything I planned for, but it looks so much nicer. And I didn't really follow a pattern, I just kind of added it in, because once I add all of the gems and the hot glue, it'll make it look a lot more full. But these beads, even on the shoulder, give it like just a nice overall look that I really enjoy. So I'm glad. I mean, I even had to do it somewhat where the collar lapel folds over. But I really like how it looks with the beads, so I'm glad I did that extra work, even though it took like 6 hours. Then it was time to put together the collar, add the lace just like I did for the outer fabric, and then start hand sewing beads to it as well. Yes, this thing took forever, but it really looks good when finished, so it was worth it, I think. Maybe. And again, not really going for any specific pattern, just adding beads as I saw fit. So the lining is attached. The collar is not behaving exactly how I need it to. As you can see, it's staying up, but it's sitting oddly. So I'm thinking what I might do is like attach pins, or not pins, snaps, so that it'll hold its shape. Hold on, let me put it in position and then put the camera on it. So right now I just have it pinned, but I think if I do that, it'll help it stay in shape. I realized after the fact that I should have put lace on the underside of the collar as well, so I do have to do that now. And then I don't know how this happened, but one side is slightly further than the other side. I thought I had it exactly even, but I guess I didn't. So I don't know if I want to even bother trying to take it apart and fix it because it'll be hidden with the lace. That's kind of where I'm at the moment. I ended up completely taking out the collar because it was going to be too difficult to get the lace on the underneath with it attached. I also cut it an inch smaller, and then to help keep it up, I inserted boning here on the edge as well as snaps that will keep it locked. There is a line of boning here. It's plastic boning, and then I also did one here. And you won't see it because the gems will hide it anyway, but it looks much better. And again, the wig's gonna hide a lot of it, so as long as it stays up enough, I think I'm okay. And it does have that kind of peak. It's falling back on the dress form, hold on. It has the peak that his has. And then I did do hook and eye because that's what they think his actually closes with. And I couldn't find a gem that was big like his, so I've used this button, and I think I'm just going to embellish around it to make it a little more fancy. I'm not happy with how this is laying, so I might futz around with it a little bit, but that's where we're at so far. So Keely mentioned that she used shoulder pads in her costume, and I agree with her on that. 80s costumes do need shoulder pads. So I picked this up at Joann's. I would have flaked them to be a little bit bigger, but honestly, these are fine. They are black, and I'll see if I can show you where it's, now you can't see it very well, but they're right there, just to give it a little more oomph and help support the collar. And after all that fussing with the collar, I did a quick try on just to see how it was sitting, and overall it worked great, but I did need to fine tune it a little bit more to get it to hold the shape. My camera doesn't like the blue and black, especially in the lighting in this room. But I added the sleeves, I sewed on a little bit more lace, and then this is gonna get all bejeweled. Here is the cuff with the buttons. I'm actually really pleased. I'm still not 100% with that collar, so I need to adjust it, but it's coming along. Now to bejewel. I have had these gems for over 3 years and never used them, so I was super excited. I finally had a project that I could use them for. This was incredibly fun to do, and I did it in maybe 15 minutes, so I do need to go back and obviously add more glue and whatnot. But the cool thing is I kind of just put it wherever, and I've been mostly using hot glue. I thought I would need to use E6000, but the hot glue is working great, and because the spider web detailing with the hot glue goes over the gems, it gives them like an extra layer of protection to stay on the fabric. But yeah, I love it already, and I still have to do the rest, but I'm obsessed. I was on such a time crunch that I worked an 8-hour shift this day, and then I came home and spent another, 2 or 3 hours gluing and burning my fingers and gluing and more burning until I had attached all of the gemstones. But again, time crunch, you do what you gotta do and you keep going until it's done. What I ended up doing was applying hot glue to the gem itself and then adding it to the coat and then putting a layer of hot glue over the gem to kind of lock it in place, and then kind of moved on to another step and then went back again and put more glue on top. And because I am a proponent of showing when things don't go right, here is me trying the jacket on and realizing that, oh, I sewed the lining in wrong. After I realized what I had done wrong, I went ahead and took the lining out, which was painstaking and annoying, and I was really mad at myself the entire time for making that mistake. I fixed it, put it back in, and then did a full try-on of the jacket, making sure everything was sitting correctly, and to my delight, it was. The collar still tends to fall back a little bit, but I think that's just due to the weight of all the gems and the glue on it, but overall, it worked. The jacket was done, so it was time to move on to the shirt. I went ahead and bought this satin at Joann's and then pulled out this Mimi G shirt pattern by Simplicity. I love this pattern. I have used it for so many projects. I highly recommend it. So with it already cut out, I just went ahead and added interfacing and got all the pieces ready for assembling. Then I added buttons. The shirt needed them, so I added them, but I wasn't happy about it. I used a basic Mimi G shirt pattern. As you saw, I've used this pattern for everything, but fate was just not having it. My overlock decided to be stupid, so I couldn't overlock a lot of the seams, and I'm on a timeline, so unfortunately it's not as good as I normally would make it, but it did work. Buttonholes are all functional. He has a stand-up collar, which I didn't realize until after I had cut the neck hole and everything else out, and I didn't have extra fabric or time to make and cut a new one. So, I mean, you don't really see his jacket anyway, his shirt anyway, because the jacket is over it. But here's the basic shirt. I did change the sleeves to just have cuffs, but not like button cuffs, just normal, because that black lace thing is gonna go over them anyway. Here's the basic shirt. It's supposed to be a stand-up collar, like I said, but what's probably going to happen, if I could even do this one-handed, is I'm going to just have him wear it like this, and then put the, I'm going to say this wrong again, jabot, around the back, and then it'll be hidden by the coat. Speaking of which, now that the shirt's done, let's put the coat over it and see how it looks. Ta-da! So far so good. Now to make the thing that I can't pronounce, I'm afraid I'm going to say it wrong and everybody's going to lambaste me, but whatever. That thing, I'm now going to make that. In looking at how to make this type of collar, I realized the shape is the exact one of Princess Leia's yoke for her Empire Strikes Back look. So this shape is basically Jareth's collar. And look at that, I already have the pattern for it because I've made this costume. So all I'm gonna do is cut it out of my fabric and then, you know, obviously do it on the fold and then make the collar piece. Here's the fabric cut out. I do need to iron it and then overlock the edges and then attach it to a piece that'll go around the neck, but pretty easy. I basically just drafted a rectangle that was long enough to go around a neck and added seam allowance and then started pleating it to the band, but I didn't really like how that looked, so I wasn't sure if I was going to keep it, but I kept going just to, you know, see how it all fit around the shirt. The yoke worked perfectly. However, I did discover it needed, whoa, there goes my dress form. Hold on. As I was saying, the pattern I used from Leia's yoke worked perfectly. It's just the right length. However, I don't think pleated is the way to go. I mean, if it had to be in, yes, but oh, there goes the dress form again. I'm telling you, I don't know why it's doing that. Does anyone else's Drit's dress form do this? I don't know why it keeps doing it. This is not that heavy, but easy fix. I just threw a yardstick under there. Anyway, as I was saying, I tried pleating it to the band, but I don't think that looks very good, so I'm going to try gathering it, and hopefully that will give me more of the gathers that I need there. And it's finished. The great thing about Bowie's costume is the ends are actually overlocked. I didn't have to do a hem or anything, just overlock the edge of the satin and it was good to go. I will admit it could be a bit wider, a bit longer, a bit floofier, but honestly it's fine. And the cool part is that it's just a separate piece that then clips around the neck, so you can wear it with or without. For the cummerbund, I just looked at a few YouTube tutorials to see what measurements people were making them, and then just drafted my own pattern on some leftover wrapping paper. On to the cummerbund. So I followed just a basic pattern that I found online to make my own pattern pieces out of wrapping paper. And then this is the fabric that I found at Joann's in the clearance section. It's not exact, but honestly his has this weird like silvery gold black look to it, so I figured this would be perfect. The first step is cutting out all my pattern pieces. Here is the finished look up to this point. I do still need to make the brooch. and then the lace that hangs under the coat from his wrist, but that shouldn't take too long. I didn't really film making the cummerbund because it's pretty basic, pretty easy. It does have pleats, as you can see, and I opted to have it closed with Velcro in the back as opposed to hook and eyes or anything else, just because it'll be easier to fit it to the person. But yeah, it's looking really good. Just a few more things and he's done. Here is the coat. What I ended up doing was adding, now we can see it, some more bead detail around the button, just because his is much more elaborate, and the button by itself just wasn't cutting it. I then added some last minute extra bead trim. This whole area was empty, so was this. So I just filled in a little bit so it wouldn't look too sparse as compared to this side. I don't know why I did more on this side than the other, but whatever. And then I did make the cuffs. They are detachable. And if you look at his, he's got, like, of course, bead detail on the lace itself. So I went ahead and did that on these as well. And they just go over the wrist, you know, with a button and elastic. They're easy to take on and off for the person wearing it. So now I'm just gonna make the brooch and Jareth will be done. I don't make jewelry. I really don't know what I'm doing here, but I basically found a button that kind of would work for the general shape and then took some spare beads and started stringing them onto string and then attaching them to the button with a lot of knots and some hot glue. And surprisingly, it worked. I added a pin back to the back of it and it was pretty much done. I'm actually really impressed with how well it came out, considering how much I don't know about making brooches or beading or any of that, you know, doing it properly. Okay, yes, I know my floor is filthy, but we're gonna do a whole roll here because Goblin King Jareth is finished. Final thoughts on this entire build. If I could go back, I would definitely get better velvet for the main coat. What we had worked great. It just, that thing collects lint, like you breathe on it and lint appears. I would recut the pattern so that it doesn't have that slit down the center back. I don't know what I was thinking when I cut it as the pattern suggested, because when you look at actual references of the costume, Jareth's doesn't have a slit, it just is one straight back. So that kind of didn't help with how the fabric stayed in the coat. Another issue was just ironing those seams was really difficult. It was melting when I tried. So I know some people are like, why didn't you iron the seams? Well, you guess what? It was melting. And even when I put a towel and everything else, it just wasn't working. So I would maybe try and use different fabrics if I had more time and more money were I to make this again. Obviously, it was probably a little bit more than $125 to make this, but that was because I had the thread, I had the interfacing, I had, you know, the patterns for the shirt that I used. A lot of things I already had in my fabric stash and in my patterns and supply closet. So if you add those in, probably this would have run me around $150, $175. But all things considered, on a budget build with not a lot of time, I'm incredibly happy. He looked phenomenal. We couldn't go, you know, 5 feet without someone stopping us to compliment his costume, take photos, you know, the whole thing. So I'm incredibly happy. I love how he looked in it. He nailed that character and that costume. And as you saw the pictures, they're phenomenal. So thank you so much for watching. And if you're interested in how to make Sarah's ball gown, or at least how I made Sarah's ball gown, stay tuned as that will be coming up next.